Have you ever wanted to hit your two-handed backhand with straighter arms like Alcaraz, many of the top ATP players, or even WTA players like Kasatkina, and you've maybe struggled with doing that or not sure why you're not able to do that or having some trouble with that? Well, I've got a great video for you. We're going to talk about the anatomy, the physiology, and the physics, the science of why it's difficult to get that straight arm configuration and ways you can work on it and make it happen for yourself. So we know that we want to get that straight arm configuration. We know that the physics dictate that that's a more optimal way to hit your two-handed backhand. Let's dive in and let me tell you all about it. Let me walk you through the anatomy and physiology, some of the physics and some of the science, and let me give you some ideas on how to train that so you can make the straight arm two-handed backhand for yourself. Why is the straighter arm configuration better on the two-handed backhand? And why should you want to build that in your own game or the games of your students or your kids? Well, the physics is very clear. When you have a straighter lever, a longer lever, you're going to get more force when you hit the ball. You're going to get more acceleration of the racket head at the end point. At the end of the lever, you're going to get more acceleration, which is going to translate into more force when you hit the ball, and it's going to create more angular momentum. So those are the main reasons why the straighter arm is better. We know from physics that if you have a longer bat or a longer racket and you accelerate it well, you're going to get more force into the ball than if you had a shorter lever. So that's really the key here. That's the science behind the whole deal. Is we all want that. We all want to optimize our swing. The straighter you can get the arm, particularly the left arm, for most of the top ATP pros, they straighten their left arm and the right arm is somewhat bent. There are some examples of pros who get both arms straight, and John Yandel calls that the power V, where both arms are like a V. But usually you see the left arm is extended straight and the right arm is a little bit bent, and that extends the lever and gives you more racket head speed at the tip of the racket. You have the axis of rotation at the shoulder joints, and you want to get this lever as long as you can while maintaining good racket head speed, maintaining your acceleration. That's the secret, that's the physics behind it, and that's why we all want that. So the question is, why don't we all get that? Why can't we get that? And especially, why don't girls get that? So let's talk briefly about the anatomy and the physiology, and then we'll dive into why women, female players, tend to have a struggle with getting the arms or arms straighter. So anatomically speaking, when you extend your racket away from your body, you need better stabilization. You need better stabilization in the shoulders, both shoulders, and that's called glenohumeral stabilization. That's the shoulder joint, the glenohumeral joint. And you also need stabilization in your scapulae, both scapula. So if you don't have that, especially in this case for female players, you're going to feel more comfortable with the racket, the mass of the racket, this lever closer in. It's going to feel more comfortable. We'll talk more about that in the next segment. But essentially, we have muscles in the shoulder joints and muscles, many muscles connecting to the scapulae that give us that stability and allow us to make a movement where this mass of the racket is far away from the trunk, and to be able to do that consistently over time, over the course of a match or a practice. So if those muscles are weak and not stabilizing the shoulder joints well, if those muscles are not stabilizing the scapulae well, remember, have two scapulae on both behind both shoulders. That's part of the shoulder girdle. If those muscles aren't strong, then you're going to have a lot of trouble, whether you're a boy or a girl, you're going to have a lot of trouble with any type of straighter arm configuration, whether that's on the two-handed backhand or also, by the way, on the much coveted straight arm forehand, which is very difficult for some players to achieve. So you're going to need glenohumeral stability, and you're going to need scapular stability. And there are muscles that contribute to that. For the shoulder joint, the glenohumeral joint, you have the rotator cuff muscles. You have supraspinatus, you have infraspinatus, you have teres minor, and you have subscapularis. There are 4 main rotator cuff muscles. And for the scapular area, for both scapulae, you have some important stabilizers that would affect your ability to get straighter arm configurations. And primarily those are trapezius, rhomboids, pectoralis minor, and serratus anterior. Those are like some of the big ones. Particularly, I'm concerned and focused on serratus anterior and pec minor, because those are the muscles that not only stabilize the scapula, both scapula, but they also help with protraction. And protraction is when your scapulae, they come around your rib cage and they branch outward, then they allow you to reach farther away from your body. So protraction is very, very important in the tennis swing if you want to get that straighter arm configuration. So to have good, strong protraction, you need a strong serratus anterior, and you need a strong pectoralis minor. Pectoralis minor is oftentimes hard for people to visualize because it's beneath the pectoralis major, but it's very important in protraction, not only in stabilization, but also in the ability to generate power far away from the body. And serratus anterior, it looks like slits. You know, a lot of boxers have a tremendously defined serratus anterior. Sometimes it's called the boxer's muscle because it allows you to reach further with your punch. In this case, we're trying to reach further with the racket. The racket's like the punch. You're trying to punch out and extend your arms, particularly on that two-handed backhand. So you need a very strong, powerful serratus anterior, and you need a very strong, powerful pectoralis minor to help you with that movement. And my feeling is, and I don't have we don't have any research studies to support this, but my feeling is that is why many people, boys and girls, struggle with getting that straighter arm configuration, especially kids, for example. You know, so it's that lack of stabilization with all the muscles that stabilize the scapular regions, and all of the muscles that stabilize the glenohumeral joint, including the deltoid, which is the largest shoulder stabilizer there. There are other muscles that also stabilize the glenohumeral joint, in addition to the 4 rotator cuff muscles that I mentioned. But that's the basic picture here with anatomy and physiology. We need all those muscles to be really strong for stabilization, and we need in particular serratus anterior and pectoralis minor to be able to move that racket away from the body powerfully and with also muscular endurance, so we can do that time and time again and be able to make that straighter arm configuration. So why do girls, women, female players, and sometimes boys, especially young children, have such a hard time getting that straighter arm configuration? Well, we know from research that women have less muscle mass in the shoulder joint areas. So in the glenohumeral joint areas, they have less muscle mass, especially with the deltoid. And we know that female players have more instability in their shoulders. They have more laxity, more joint laxity in their shoulders, in the joint. So that combination of a lack of stability and a lack of strength could easily be the reason why many female players feel comfortable keeping the racket in close to their body. You see so many female players that swing like this. I think of Swiatek and many, many others who don't feel comfortable getting the racket far away from their body. I've had many students, many female students and also boys who say to me that it doesn't feel comfortable to get the racket out there. They feel a lot more comfortable in here. And so, like, why do you think that is? For me, it has to be, you know, it's most likely, we need some research studies to prove this, but the link has got to be related to, most likely related to these types of things that I'm discussing. Stability in the shoulder joints and also in the scapula areas, and also the strength. And particularly, as I mentioned in the last segment, the strength of the protraction. So you need scapular protraction to get that racket out away from your body. And that would be the muscles of pectoralis minor and serratus anterior in particular. But all of the muscles around the scapular areas have to be strong and stable, and we need strong and stable shoulders. That could be one of the main reasons women don't feel comfortable getting the mass of the racket and using that long lever that we know is advantageous in terms of the physics. We know that the optimal physics dictate that we should have a longer lever and get the racket farther away from our body to generate more force and more angular momentum out there. But a lot of women don't feel comfortable doing that, and this could be a very good reason why. In addition, we do know from research about the joint laxity that females tend to have among all different types of athletes. So that could be another reason too, that women don't feel very stable out here. They feel some instability. They don't feel enough stability in the glenohumeral joint in particular. So they resort to a comfort here. When you swing here, it's very interesting. Sometimes in the research it's described as using the holding muscles or the carrying muscles. And I found that fascinating because the carrying muscles are primarily your biceps and also your deltoids, particularly anterior deltoids. And so it's fascinating that if you think about the way women hit their backhand, the way female players hit their two-handed backhands, it looks like they're carrying something. If you look carefully, look at my arms, it looks like I'm carrying something heavy here. And this is where female players feel very comfortable. They're using a lot of biceps to hold the weight of the racket, and they're using their deltoids, the largest muscle group that they have in the shoulder joint area, the strongest muscle group that they have in the shoulder area, especially compared to the rotator cuff muscles. And so the women feel comfortable in here, and they're using their carrying muscles. Biceps is engaged through the swing, deltoids are heavily engaged, and what they're not using are the weaker ones that we talked about, or they're not going to put their, they're not going to put their shoulders or their scapula in a position of instability. So out here, it's no longer using those. You're still using the shoulders, of course. You're using the deltoid, but you're not using your biceps in nearly the same way. The biceps are not carrying the racket anymore. The biceps have been disengaged, and what's engaged is more the triceps in terms of extension here, and you're engaging those protractors that I talked about of the scapula. And those protractors, pec minor and serratus anterior, they are very active here, and the shoulder joints have to be very stable out here. And it makes sense that female players do not feel very good out here. They don't like that feeling because they're not very strong out there and they're not very stable out there. So they like to swing with these carrying muscles. And I think that's just a fascinating observation. I just picked up reading some research that they're using biceps and deltoid. And biceps and deltoid makes a lot of sense that a female player or a male player who's not super strong or stable either would say, yeah, this feels a lot more comfortable. I feel like I have a lot better stability in here, and I feel good. I feel strong and stable in here. It makes sense that a female player would relate to the swing that way. So I have some practical recommendations, and I really think this is something that we can solve, like as coaches, as trainers, as athletes. We can get better stabilization in the scapulae. We can get better strength in the scapular areas, in the glenohumeral joints, the muscles surrounding there. And we can actually help players achieve the more optimal straighter arm mechanics by working on some strength and stability off the court. So I think that's really smart. I have a saying, it's a strength issue, but it's not a strength issue. So Dr. Brian Gordon talks about how there's not a strength reason why kids and female players can't do the ATP mechanics, but I think that he's missing that there may be some strength and stability issues that do prevent some female players from actually accomplishing the straighter arm mechanics that we know is optimal. And so we can address those off the court. So there's some practical things that you can do, such as, there's lots of rotational strengthening you can do for the rotator cuff. I'm not going to demonstrate all the exercises here, but that might be good content for another video. You can do Y raises, prone Y raises. You can do scapular push-ups. You can do any kind of movements for protraction. I think would be very beneficial for anyone who's struggling to get the straighter arm mechanics. Boxing is good. there's a lot of gym exercises you can do for protraction that are awesome. You know, you can work on, you want strong triceps to engage that extension. You want strong protractors. So anything that works on pec minor and serratus anterior, pullover type movements, any exercise that's strengthening the protractors is, I think, very, very beneficial to help athletes do the straighter arm mechanics. And then you need strong rotator cuff muscles. So that's supraspinatus, subscapularis, teres minor, and infraspinatus. You're going to need to strengthen those external rotators, internal rotators, have a very strong and good endurance also in the rotator cuff, because the rotator cuff provides a lot of the muscular stability for the glenohumeral joint, which is not a very stable joint, just anatomically and physiologically speaking. So we know we want to get the shoulder joints stable and strong, and we want to strengthen especially the protractors of the scapulae, but also just all the muscles around the scapulae. Trapezius is one that I sort of neglected in the last segment. Trapezius is another one of those carrying muscles. You know, when you're carrying something, you're going to engage your trapezius muscles for carrying a load. So you want to have really strong trapezius, which will help stabilize the scapulae, and you want to have strong rhomboids. You know, you can do retractions for the rhomboids. It's very good to try to get the stabilization in the scapulae, and then the shoulder joints can be stabilized as well. And when you combine all of that, you have a strong, stable shoulder girdle, stronger, stable shoulder joints. I think you're bound to have players who say to you as a coach, or if you're a player yourself, you're going to be able to do that straighter arm configuration, and you're going to be like, hey, this is not so bad. This feels comfortable. I feel strong and stable here. I can do this. You know, you're going to have more women, more female players saying, I can do this. And you're going to have young kids saying, you know what? I can do this. Doesn't feel that uncomfortable. I can get out there and I can generate force out there because I have enough stabilization and I'm strong enough in my scapulae and in my shoulder joints. Guys, I hope you enjoyed some of the insights in this video. I really truly believe that this may be the root of why so many players, especially female players, like to keep the racket in close and they don't optimize their biomechanics. And I think there's a pathway where we can work on these things off the court with stabilization exercises, with strengthening exercises, to get the shoulder joints more strong and stable, and to get the scapular areas more strong and stable. And that will unlock this optimal biomechanics for many, many players, female players, younger players. So I'm very excited to work on these areas with my own students. I think it's going to unlock new avenues for them, new capabilities in their technique, and it's going to help players really get that straighter arm mechanics, not just on the two-handed backhand, but possibly for the ATP forehand as well. So I'm super excited. I hope you're pumped too. I hope you see the potential benefit here. And obviously, we need some research in this area. Historically, tennis research has been very thin. You know, if you look in the databases out there and the journal articles, there's not a lot of tennis research out there. So we need more focused research. We need a preponderance of evidence to try to prove that this is there's a real link here. But just based on my coaching experience and studying some of the literature that's out there, I think this is a good hypothesis. And I would definitely, it doesn't hurt to work on shoulder stability because it's good for all athletes. It doesn't work. It's not a problem. You know, there's no negative to working on better stability or strength in the rotator cuff. There's no negative in working on better strength or stability in the scapular areas, you know. So I think it's a win-win. If you do if you do the exercises to get that stability and strength, you know, it's going to help your players play better and prevent injuries and and improve performance. But it also may unlock, if you combine those types of off-court exercises with good technical instruction on generating the straighter arm configuration, and you explain the rationale, especially to young kids or female players, about why they want to get that longer lever. Remember back to the physics segment that I talked about, where that longer lever is going to equal more racket head speed at the tip of the lever. And it's going to give you more angular momentum. That's something that's very, very valuable that all players want, and they should want. So if you can explain that rationale to the athlete, or if you're the athlete, understand why it's important and why you'd want to work on this thing. And then if you can give them some off-court conditioning, strength training exercises where they can develop a little bit better stability and strength, that may unlock this optimal technique to the benefit of all players. If you'd like suggestions for how to train stability and strength in the glenohumeral joints or the scapular areas, drop a comment, straight arm, in the comments area, and I'll get back to you personally. Guys, if you like this video on the anatomy, physiology, and physics of the straight arm two-handed backhand, and you'd like to see more, check out this video that I made right here.